Rosie O'Donnell has shared one of the most personal updates yet about her daughter Chelsea after visiting her in prison and reflecting publicly on what that visit meant. The new post was not framed as a legal argument or a public defense. It was a mother describing a difficult visit, a daughter trying to stay sober, and a relationship that Rosie says has become closer during one of the hardest chapters of their family's life. The unanswered question now is not simply what happened in court. That part has a public timeline. The deeper question is what this visit means for Chelsea's current status, Rosie's relationship with her daughter, and what remains unknown about the road ahead. For verified entertainment updates without the rumors, subscribe to Startline Entertainment. The latest update came when Rosie shared a poem and photo after visiting Chelsea in prison. In the reflection, Rosie described seeing Chelsea walk into the visitation room, noticing that she looked healthy and calm, and feeling the emotional weight of seeing her daughter in that setting. Rosie wrote about trying to stay present, about the sadness of the moment, and about the kind of unconditional love that becomes most important when family life is at its most complicated. Chelsea, now 28, is Rosie O'Donnell's eldest daughter. Rosie adopted her as a baby with her then-partner Kelly Carpenter, and Chelsea's life has been public at several difficult points over the past decade. But the current chapter began with a series of arrests in Wisconsin in 2024. Followed by guilty pleas, probation, and then a probation revocation that sent Chelsea to prison. The public record shows that Chelsea was arrested multiple times between September and November of 2024. The charges reported at the time included drug-related counts, bail jumping, resisting or obstructing an officer, and earlier allegations involving child neglect. By early 2025, the legal process had moved into guilty pleas and sentencing. In March, Chelsea was sentenced to 6 years of probation after pleading guilty to 3 counts: resisting or obstructing an officer, felony bail jumping, and possession of methamphetamine. That probation came with strict conditions. Chelsea was required to maintain sobriety, avoid alcohol or controlled substances without a valid prescription, avoid contact with known drug users or sellers, and avoid possessing or owning a firearm. Court reporting also said she was required to pursue education and a mental health evaluation. At the time, the court made clear that prison could follow if probation conditions were violated. That is what later changed. In October 2025, Chelsea's probation was revoked, and she was sentenced to prison time. Local Wisconsin reporting said court records showed she was sentenced to prison in her Marinette County case on October 22. A Wisconsin Department of Corrections spokesperson later confirmed that her probation had been revoked on October 16 for violating supervision terms and that she was being held pending transport to serve her prison sentence. Rosie responded at the time by asking for prayers and by saying publicly that she loved Chelsea before addiction took over and still loved her now. In a statement, Rosie said she had compassion for people struggling with addiction and described Chelsea's journey as painful for Chelsea and her 4 young children. The language was careful, but it was also deeply personal. Rosie did not present the story as a courtroom dispute. She presented it as a family facing the consequences of addiction, legal trouble, and separation. Now, months later, Rosie's prison visit has given the public a different kind of update. This time, the focus was not on the arrest record, not on the charges, and not on the court order. It was on the visit itself. Rosie said Chelsea had asked her to come, which she described as meaningful. Before the visit, Rosie wrote about preparing herself emotionally. She knew seeing her daughter in prison clothes would be hard. She knew the setting would be structured and limited. She also knew she had to go, because Chelsea had asked. When Rosie arrived, she described waiting in a room that felt strangely disconnected from the reality of the visit. She wrote about the heat, the rules, the restrictions, and the emotional confusion of trying to hold herself together in a place designed around control and separation. When Chelsea finally entered, Rosie's attention went immediately to how her daughter looked. She said Chelsea looked healthy, calm, rested, and clear. For a mother who has spoken publicly about addiction in her family, those details carried weight. The visit included a brief embrace. Rosie wrote that Chelsea smelled familiar and that they held on tightly. That kind of detail is small, but it is the kind of detail that makes the update different from a normal celebrity legal recap. It shows why the story has drawn attention beyond the courtroom. It is not just about a famous person's daughter being incarcerated. It is about what a parent sees when the legal system becomes the place where she has to meet her child. Rosie also wrote that Chelsea's 4 children have not visited her in prison, and that she believes this pains Chelsea. That point should be handled carefully. It is not a prompt for speculation about the children, their caregivers, or private family decisions. The only public fact is that Rosie said the children have not visited, and that she believes Chelsea feels that loss. Anything beyond that has not been publicly established. The visit was supposed to last longer, but Rosie said it was cut short because of severe weather. A tornado warning interrupted the visit, and Rosie wrote that Chelsea appeared crestfallen when they had to leave. After a quick goodbye hug, Rosie returned to her car and later described the stormy drive back to her hotel as part of processing everything that had happened. She said it was a big day for both of them. That line is the emotional center of the update. A prison visit is not a resolution. It does not erase the case. It does not answer every question about Chelsea's future. But Rosie framed it as a meaningful step for both mother and daughter, especially after a long and public history of strain. Rosie has also said that Chelsea calls her daily from prison and that the two have gotten closer through these tense times. She connected that closeness to Chelsea's sobriety, writing that it gives her hope. That matters because Rosie has previously described addiction as a long-running struggle in Chelsea's life. In October 2024, when Chelsea's arrests were first making headlines, Rosie said publicly that this was not new for the family and that Chelsea had struggled with drug addiction for a decade. That history is important, but it should not be used to reduce Chelsea to her worst public moments. The verified facts show legal trouble, probation, and prison. Rosie's statements also show a mother trying to speak about addiction with compassion rather than condemnation. The responsible way to cover this story is to hold both truths at once. Chelsea has faced serious legal consequences, and Rosie is publicly choosing to keep the language centered on love, recovery, and accountability. There is another reason the story is getting attention now. Rosie herself has been increasingly public again, including appearances and personal writing that has put her back in the entertainment conversation. Just days before this prison visit story circulated, she attended the 2026 Tony Awards in New York. But this update is not about red carpets or career promotion. It is about how a celebrity family's private pain becomes public when legal records, social media posts, and media reporting intersect. The timeline is clear. Chelsea was arrested in Wisconsin in 2024. She later pleaded guilty to selected charges. In March 2025, she received probation with strict conditions. In October 2025, that probation was revoked and she was sentenced to prison time. In June 2026, Rosie shared a public reflection after visiting Chelsea in prison, saying the visit was emotional, brief, and meaningful. What is less clear is what happens next. Rosie wrote about Chelsea looking forward to release and planning a post-prison journey. She used language about staying drug-free, making amends, reconnecting with her children, and finding peace. But the exact release timeline and the full details of Chelsea's post-prison plan have not been publicly confirmed in the sources available. That distinction matters. Hope is public because Rosie shared it. A full plan is not public unless the family or court records provide it. This is also where legal wording matters. Chelsea was not merely in trouble, and the story should not be softened into vague language. She pleaded guilty to specific charges, was sentenced to probation, and later had that probation revoked. At the same time, the coverage should not exaggerate beyond the record. Some reports have described additional allegations or supervision issues, but not every detail has been fully explained in public court reporting. The safest and most accurate line is that her probation was revoked after violations of supervision terms, and she is serving prison time as a result. Rosie's public writing also invites a broader conversation about parents of adult children who struggle with addiction. But that conversation should not become diagnosis, blame, or speculation. Rosie has spoken about addiction as part of Chelsea's story. She has also spoken about compassion, fear, hope, and forgiveness. The public can understand those themes without pretending to know every private family decision behind them. One of the most notable parts of Rosie's reflection is that it does not read like a perfect reconciliation story. It reads like someone trying to be honest about conflicting emotions. She is proud, sad, hopeful, exhausted, and still processing. She describes love and forgiveness as necessary, especially when they feel impossible. That complexity is why the post has resonated. It does not offer a simple ending. It offers a current status. The current status is this: Chelsea O'Donnell is in prison after a probation revocation connected to her Wisconsin cases. Rosie O'Donnell recently visited her, shared a photo and poem about the experience, and said Chelsea's sobriety and their daily calls have given her hope. The legal consequences remain real, the family impact remains painful, and the post-prison road remains publicly unresolved. The Startline takeaway is that this story should not be packaged as a scandal or a takedown. The most important new development is not the existence of Chelsea's legal trouble. That had already been reported. The new development is Rosie's first-person reflection after seeing her daughter in prison and her suggestion that, in the middle of incarceration, their relationship has become closer. That does not erase the legal history. It changes the emotional frame around the latest update. There is also a caution here. Public figures often have family members who become part of the news cycle because of proximity to fame. That does not mean every painful detail should become entertainment. In this case, the public facts are enough. The charges, the guilty pleas, the probation, the revocation, the prison sentence, and Rosie's own words about the visit. Anything beyond that, especially involving Chelsea's children or private family dynamics, should be treated with restraint. For now, Rosie's message is not that everything is fixed. It is that she saw her daughter, held her briefly, noticed signs of calm and sobriety, and left with both sadness and hope. That is the verified update. Chelsea remains in a difficult legal chapter. Rosie remains publicly supportive, and the next real milestone will be whatever is officially confirmed about Chelsea's release, recovery plans, or future court status. Until then, the story stands as a public reminder of how complicated family love can become when addiction, legal consequences, motherhood, and fame all collide. Rosie O'Donnell's latest post does not close the chapter. It simply shows where the chapter is now. A prison visit, a mother and daughter trying to hold on, and a future that Rosie says she is still hoping Chelsea can rebuild.